Um, when it comes to this offering, again, when it comes to the solid metal detector part of it, I mean, it's one of those products that a lot of people, from just a purely rational standpoint, would have a hard time justifying it. Especially like your average, run-of-the-mill do-it-yourselfer, at home, because normally they don't cut through anything other than, like, say, plywood or 2x4s or something that don't have nails in them, because they're dealing with fresh lumber. However, the thing about it is that I'm sure there's at least 10% of the American or U.S. households, or more, maybe even 20%, have a saw like this in their home. And almost every amateur has certainly had that experience of trying to remodel their home or something. A lot of them have. Maybe not everyone. A lot of them have had that experience of trying to cut through a wall or something like that, to do an addition on their home or whatever, and have cut through a nail and ruined a saw blade. So, from a rational standpoint, on a daily basis, they may not need one of these things. But then again, from a reactionary standpoint, and again, all purchases are not always rational. But from just a reactionary standpoint, almost all of them have had that experience of dulling a blade, so they can instantly see the value proposition there from that standpoint. Even though, from a rational standpoint, it's pretty rare that you take your saw and go cut through walls with it, but it does happen. And if the price is right, again, that impulse buy factor could actually be there for some people. Now, of course, there are some other people, like contractors and stuff, that actually do frequently cut through walls, and a lot of times they use much more expensive saw blades, 30, 40, $50 saw blades sometimes, that could get ruined. And even if they use a cheaper saw blade, still going through a bunch of cheap saw blades means you got to change the saw blade out and everything else. It's still not a desirable outcome, to even ruin a $5 or $6 cheap saw blade, or a $10 blade or whatever, because those can still add up. And I can see that basically a device like this, certainly for contractors, would make sense from the standpoint that, well, if it's priced, in and around the $20 to $30 range retail, I think they can justify it just by simply the fact that, geez, even just ruining one saw blade to this could pay for, could justify the price of this thing, because it could pay for a saw blade. So, at the end of the day, it does have that potential, to resonate, with the people that are more, that use these things on a more regular basis. But even, again, from the consumer standpoint, again, if it's kept within a certain range, it can, have that justification, just simply because the fact that many, many people that own a saw like this have actually had that experience. And, kind of, dreaded it, oh man, yeah, it did suck, having to change out the saw blade and stuff like that. So it does have that going for it. And the nice thing, too, is in this IP, I do have enough value-added features and so forth to actually differentiate two models. You could have like a cheap consumer model and a more pro model too. Cheap consumer price point, being 10, $15 a piece retail, is not out of the question. And then you have the one with more bells and whistles on it. That's the pro model, the one with the spring-loaded, protection and so forth. Certainly looks more robust. Maybe that $20 to $30, a piece range retail. So it's got that potential going for it, regardless of whichever design you want to choose. Um, but in any event, I mean, again, given the potential number of sales in just the U.S. alone, I mean, I certainly don't think selling, over a period of a number of years, perhaps, 3, 4 million of these things, that wouldn't be out of the question at all, I don't think. And and it could be a lot more than that. It could even become a staple product because, again, people are still going to be running into nails 10, 15, 20 years from now, and like they are now in all likelihood. I doubt that saw technology is going to be replaced by ultrasonic based lasers or something, in the meantime. So at the end of the day, it could actually have a staple run. In other words, it could be a product that outlives the life of its patent. And like I said, if nothing else, I mean, I know it would work on As Seen on TV as a direct response, infomercial type thing, because that impulse buy would be there for a lot of people. I mean, I think it would work quite well as seen on TV. So again, if you guys in PPAX, you PPAX type people, in your PPAX genre aren't interested in it, I'll consider taking it through that avenue, or through some of the printed catalog companies in that genre. So like Hammaker, Schumacher, or whatever they call themselves, and Sky Mall or what have you, could work there too. So, but I do think this has that built-in value proposition because again, most people have had that experience, and like I said, I mean, this could actually sell a lot better than I depict, but and considerably better. I mean, it's hard to assess because it's one of those products that's a little bit of a wild card because because of that. Like I said, it's got that issue where a lot of people wouldn't, from a rational standpoint, if they stop to really think about it, again, which a lot of people don't if the price is right, they're less likely to think about it still. But it does have that built-in, oh, I can see the point of that, going for it. And then, of course, there are people, and this is the more solid side, that actually could use the thing, that actually would save them some money on saw blades and so forth. So it does make sense from that standpoint. So that's a nice little factor that could at least drive initial sales. Certainly sell again 2 or 3 million units over the course of relatively small amount of time, let alone the course of the life of the patent. I mean, it could sell 5-10 million units just to the people that really need it over the course of 20 years. That's not out of the question at all. And remember, there'll be a loss factor to these too. I mean, nothing lasts forever, so sometimes things get worn out and everything like that, and our new models come out. I've certainly provided rich, fertile ground for that possibility, now haven't I? So, now the version that has the laser in it, of course, that can be adapted to the other embodiment as well, but that was just the best embodiment for it to put it into because it didn't have any immediate obstruction. In the sense that the coil to the metal detector is actually located in the body of the device on the printed circuit board. But certainly having a laser on a saw, I'm sure somebody probably has some kind of IP already about that out there. I have no idea. I didn't really look into that deeply. However, the specific way I did it is probably a little unique, using the fiber optic system and the line generating optics built into it. That's got some merit right there. However, that would be a nice feature because I'll tell you, those little frickin' readouts, little cut notch on a saw, man, that's not very accurate. It'd be nice having a laser beam projecting out ahead of the saw in a fan so you could make sure your saw is actually on track with that line. I mean, that really is one of the best uses of lasers and power tools. I mean, they put lasers in miter saws, a few years back, and honestly, that does help because it's actually a pain in the butt to try to align that blade with your mark on your 2x4s or whatever. I mean, it really actually made sense. I thought it was kind of gimmicky at first, but it actually is a good feature to have. But for a frickin' skill saw, they don't call them skill saws for nothing. Me trying to cut a straight line on a skill saw is really tough, and I'm not new to saws. I've done lots of construction. But still, I mean, I can't get a very good cut, very straight cut, even with a chalk line or even a pencil drawn line, but mostly because I tend to lose track on it. But it needs to be a nice bright laser because you're often using those saws out in daylight and under the sun and everything. So it's got to be a nice bright laser. But certainly having that as a feature in a saw, boy, just makes all the damn sense in the world because you can get a lot more cuts because you're not just looking at the place you're cutting right in front of your saw, but actually clear down the board so it makes your alignment more accurate. With a fan, kind of a fan beam on it. So at the end of the day, that is something that really, really is sorely needed. And you don't even need a fan optic on it. You could just have a straight laser beam, not just a point, and that would provide you good enough guidance, but you'd still be better off, honestly, with it being a fan, because then you could look at it at any point along that travel to make sure you're accurate no matter where your eyes happen to be focused. So anyway, that's something to take into account. And like I said, the version with the optical measurement sensor, that's just one of those things that, it's kind of a gimmick, like I already discussed in the other video, and I won't really talk about it much here, except that, still as a gimmick factor it could sell. I mean, but it would particularly sell well on a scene on TV, because gimmicks really sell on a scene on TV commercials. But, at the end of the day, I mean, if it was refined, it could actually be a good product. But, the point I'm trying to introduce here is the idea of using that type of technology in power tools. And that's the real kind of baseline point to this part of the IP offering that I have here. Um, so, but stay tuned, because there are some points to this that may actually interest you when it comes to this in general. Um, because I mean, right after I, got done spending all the work drafting this thing up, because remember, I mean, I'm trying to do like 87 inventions here, so I'm trying to throw as much of this, much of my ideas in this IP as I can, to put the numbers on my side, to just statistically speaking, to make it more likely than not that I'm going to make some money out of this IP that I have to offer. So a lot of things I didn't think about. Well, I mean, not a lot of things. Most things are actually really well thought out, but this is one of those that I kind of threw everything to the kitchen sink into it. I got carried away. So, I mean, at first, when I was done with it, I was like, oh man, this almost is a crackpot idea to put this, to do this. It's almost a crackpot idea. And I don't generally like having crackpot inventions in my notebooks. But it does have some merit, and again, continue listening, and you'll begin to see the light, particularly as it pertains to the robot. Yeah, but originally, when it came to this, this like little tape measure or distance measuring aspect of it, incorporating this in there, I was just trying to think of what features I could throw into this to, add extra value to it. But again, after I was done with it, I just couldn't imagine, after I'd already filed the PPA and everything, I was like, well, I can't imagine why on earth people would want to do that. Even though, like I said, if it were refined, it could, but, that's still my initial reaction, is that, oh my God, now these guys are going to think I'm an idiot, a crackpot, for putting this in there. But I'd already, done so much work, and it was already too late, it's already filed. But if it was part of a, like a CNC device, okay, like a router on a ShopBot or other, Cartesian-based cutter, it would actually kind of make sense to have some kind of non-contact technology like this to keep track of the distance, because a lot of them are stepper motor based, and those stepper motors basically can kind of lose track where they are. If the let's just say if the device runs into an obstruction or something like that, or the cutting tool starts to fall out of the router, which I've had that happen and almost start a fire before. It'd be nice if it had kind of a system like this to detect that event that independently measures distance. And the great thing about these optical sensors and these mice is they're like little video cameras, is what they are, and they actually measure displacement. So if the controller, could actually see that, oh, I should be moving this distance, but the optical sensor says I've only moved this distance, it knows something's wrong and can stop, the machine immediately and start sounding an alarm or something. That's one aspect, of using this in some sort of a power tool or power router or something could come in handy. And plus, stepper motors too, can sometimes miss steps, even, as part of their cutting operation. It'd be nice if the controller were actually aware of that as sort of a feedback mechanism. And again, these devices, generally, if you play with your optical mouse and actually try to hover it above your mouse pad, you'll see it's kind of a non-contact thing. And in theory, a customized device like this could actually be made that actually increases that detection distance a little bit. And they may already have one. That's the great thing about this technology, is that you could use it right off the shelf, from the current manufacturer. So, it's hard to say, what's going on, but it's certainly got that aspect of it. Now, there's certainly a good chance that, somebody's already gotten this part of it, or this aspect of it, patented. I kind of just threw this in here with the expectation that maybe it is patented, maybe it isn't. So, it's kind of a Hail Mary. I did a lot more research on the metal detector side, but all this other stuff I started adding in is just, additional features to the main concept. but eventually so much IP collected here that it could be its own deal, particularly as it pertains to that little robot. But I mean, that other embodiment too with a built-in tape measure is kind of a cool idea. And the little digitizing measure itself has some merit, because there are times when it's nice to be able to do that, particularly on a flat surface. Um, and those roto rulers, the rulers with a wheel on it, or the tape measure with a wheel on it, are sometimes a bit lacking in that area. Um, but still, that's one of those applications still a little more dubious. But however, the version that I had, that last embodiment that has a real tape measure built into it, that may actually prove kind of useful, and just possibly. So it's got that that little aspect going for it. And in the text of the provisional patent, I do mention the possibility of just incorporating a regular rotor ruler and a roller ruler and a standard tape measure too is another possibility, which certainly could be done as an alternative. But this version that I have depicted could actually, like I said, digitize curves, and so you could upload them into your computer and so forth. Okay, now when it comes to the little optical robot, it's based on optical mouse technology. This is particularly useful because technology really works well on a lot of different surfaces and so forth, even if they're slick and so forth. But the only thing it doesn't work on with these current types of sensors is like clear glass. But at the end of the day, it actually makes a good guidance system for a little robot. And it's been an invention in my notebooks for a long time to have a little robot, and this is basically, so this kind of technology was available back in the Mr. Wizard days, back in like 1980. But, to have a little robot with a pin on it, but the difference is that this robot, is a device that you'd hook up to your computer or Bluetooth-enabled device or whatever, can actually download a curve or a pattern to trace out like on a blank piece of plywood, so that you can later use that to guide your saws, particularly for bizarre curves and other patterns you may want to cut out, and pen not even plywood. It could even be used on materials and fabrics and things like that if it's held taut on a pin board or something like that. Provided with suitable means to mark on the surface. But it certainly can lay, like tile patterns out on your floor for laying ceramic tile or linoleum or carpeting or what have you. It's got those applications as well. So, at the end of the day, it really does have a lot of merit to have a little product like this out of the market. And again, I mean, this has been in, basically my notebooks for, a good 15 years, doing something like that, because it does have a lot of merit. But definitely a little robot that can draw, patterns out. Now, like I said, any IP on fundamentally a robot that draws lines and so forth, is not going to be patent protectable at a fundamental level, but certainly incorporating this optical mouse technology into it, which actually makes a lot of sense. That's some kind of traction-based system. For the same reason, this would be a good sensor for CNC technology, like a CNC router. It makes sense to have this work for putting patterns on your floor or what have you, because it can tell when it misses a step. It can tell if there's a discrepancy between where the robot thinks it is and where it really is. So, because of those factors, it really does have some merit there. So basically, if you wanted to lay out, in plywood, cut yourself an hourglass, shaped tabletop, or, or some kind of, blob-shaped curve or some bizarre, a nouveau thing, that would, set you the pattern there that you can use, your other cutting equipment to cut with. Could even come in handy for drywall and so forth, cutting particularly intricate patterns, although that's a little bit of a stretch. But basically, like I said, getting a curve, on a piece of plywood or some other, sheet material that you're wanting to cut, could even be sheet metal or anything like that. It's another possibility for plasma cutting, like if you wanted to do that. Is actually really tough, So you can just think of this like a really, 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 really poor man's CNC table, because even though it doesn't cut the material for you, it at least puts the patterns down there directly from your computer. And I do outline, and discuss and outline kind of a little alignment block system too with sheet material that would be used with a little robot to set a datum point, at one of the corners of an uncut sheet of material, so it gives you a good straight reference point to begin with. So it does have some merit, as a useful device out there. When it comes to this robot, I mean, it really could be a mega seller. It's just amazing nobody's actually really pushed something like this through the general market, because it really could open the doors, especially for creative people, but even just general carpenters and so forth, that need to do something fancy, especially since, this day and age, people's imagination runs wild, so, the fancier the need for the carpentry. So, at the end of the day, there is something to be said for it. You could you could call it the pocket CNC, because that's basically sort of what it is, or the pocket, well, I don't want to say pocket router because it doesn't actually route, but anyway, you get my drift. But, regarding the patentability of the stuff, if you just rush out there and steal my idea, it proves that it can't, be strongly patented. Just remember this: I'll never knock on your door again. So, if you like the idea enough to run off with it, because I couldn't get a strong patent on it, I mean, my offer here is pretty cheap, at the end of the day, if nothing else. Because, again, I still am not sure about what strength IP. You guys, that's why I'm bringing it to industry mostly first, because, you guys are in a better position to determine how to get really strong IP on this than I am. But, still, at the end of the day, this isn't the only idea I have. I've got plenty more, and most of them are way better, than some of this, some of these ideas are. But it was just still, something I wanted to throw into my PPA that I thought would be simple enough at first with the saw metal detector. Then it just got kind of carried away into this other other zones. So, yeah, but you got to keep in mind too, like I said, I've basically been doing carpentry and stuff like that ever since I was like 8 years old. So, I mean, it's like I said, my, relatives put me to work, and they're working in the rent houses and stuff, and just off and on my entire life I've had a lot of carpentry and experience with tools and doing various crafts, tiling and, certainly, of course, electrical work and plumbing and all this other stuff. So, I mean, I've got a lot of tool ideas. I mean, I really do, that have been building up on my list in my master list over the years. So, like I said, I've got over 2,000 inventions in my notebooks, and I got a good fraction of those that are tool based, and some I'll take to PPACs, to industry, and and that's why this product here is particularly interesting, because it's my first attempt to talk to somebody in PPACs about one of my tool inventions and ideas. And because of that, whoever I establish a relationship first with my, a tool-based invention, I'm likely to bring more tool-based inventions to for the right to first pick. Which means when I bring you an invention, the buck stops on you for a limited time for us to negotiate a deal before I move on and show it to other people. And that's a nice position to have with somebody like me, because you really ain't seen nothing yet with this. You really ain't seen nothing yet. And so, at the end of the day, I do have a lot of other IP, that I'll be bringing somebody's way. But again, I can certainly will be taking some of it too to other genres sometimes, like Sky Mall and ASCII on TV. I don't like having all my eggs in one basket, but still, if I have a relationship with a tool manufacturer, there's a lot of times I'm going to want to bring it to you more than ASCII on TV, especially for most tools, or Sky Mall or something like that. If you, can put that extra, go that extra mile with it and really evolve it into something really good. So anyway, that's where I'm kind of coming from with this. Oh yeah, and that's a little point that I kind of forgot to point out. There's a little point that I forgot to point out on the robot, is that the wheels still in the robot are meant to be retractable too. So, you can actually digitize curves with it, just like the other embodiments that were acting as digitizers only. So it's not only a robot, but you can use it to digitize curves as well, by just retracting the wheels and kind of scooting it around on your plywood or whatever, like a mouse, if you want to digitize a curve or take measurements and so forth, even though it's a little bulky. But and the fact of the matter is, you may want to come up with a better ergonomic design or whatnot for that. But the point is that it can be used that way as well. So you can digitize curves. Like let's say if you had a piece of plywood, that's cut in an oddball shape and you want to cut a shape out of it. Well, you can digitize more or less that shape of that plywood, upload it to your computer, put your little design on it, and then load that back into the robot and then put it in there. And like I said, use a little squaring mechanism that I alluded to, the square tool to square it up or what have you, or even don't use it if you don't want to, and just hit go and it draws that pattern out, and then you cut it out and Bob's your uncle. So that's a point that I needed to make as well. And of course too, the other thing you can do with it too is simply copy or digitize a curve, and then you don't have to upload it to a computer. You can just take it to another piece of material or plywood or something like that and just hit go, and it'll draw that same curve. And that's also kind of nice too. If you need to cut a lot of shapes out of plywood, you could download it from the computer or digitize it off something, like maybe even a window you want to cut out or something like that. If you need to cut a hole for some kind of oddball shape, on a piece of plywood or whatnot, well, you could do that, put it in the computer, shrink it down a bit or what have you, and then take it and stick it, or use your iPhone or whatever, tablet, and then stick it on your plywood, have it trace it out, and you cut your dimensions for a perfect fit, that kind of thing. So that's certainly one possibility, and but it's, when you start to really put your thinking cap on it, there's a lot of possibilities, including this, certainly taking a pattern off the computer and, being able to put the same pattern on multiple pieces of plywood or other sheet material that you need to cut out, so you can, just hit duplicate. And it's also certainly possible with a little screen on it to have multiple curves actually stored in memory and so forth, including default shapes, like I think I talk about a little bit in the text of the PPA. So there's just a lot of interesting possibilities that this technology, could be evolved into, and I can almost bet you a lot of that is patentable in one way, shape, form, or another, when you start getting into the nuances of it. But I do think this is really a very lucrative and rich little set of IP here, at least potentially. And like I said, it's not like I'm asking a fortune for it, and you do get the benefit of me knocking on your door again, if we do business with each other on it one way or the other. And believe me, when it comes to that, like I said, I'm just still. That's why I said I was almost embarrassed when I came up with this idea. I thought it was kind of crackpot, putting it in there, but I got carried away. I don't want this to be represented, but I do have a lot of really good tool ideas. This I don't even want to say this is the tip of the iceberg, because it really isn't the iceberg at all yet. But I do have a lot of really good tool ideas too. This is, you can consider this one of my lamer ideas, this whole thing. So particularly this part of it, this sensor part of it. But I still say that little robot is a damn good idea, and having something like that out there it really is a much needed little device. A portable, carried along with you, CNC device. Like I said, particularly in this day and age. And the thing is, it could certainly be marketed outside of the tool industry too. So at arts and crafts stores too, as well as Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever. And by the way, if you're interested, I actually had an original version of this tape, which is like 36 minutes long, that actually has some details on some of these other concepts, like the little squaring mechanism and so forth. So if you're interested in that, I can provide them to you. The video or the audio is not as great on it, but that's why I'm kind of jumping around a lot on this, because I'm actually compiling this audio while I'm listening to the other audio, so I can just take the best parts out and try to shorten it down and improve the audio quality.